You're very welcome. What you have just seen is footage of two runners, one male and one female going for a run. The male's preparation in terms of time and route can be seen as minimal. The female, on the other hand, has to put a lot more thought into her route, her attire, time of day, and letting others know. Throughout this series, we ask why this is the case and explore and highlight the many challenges women face in Ireland and indeed the world today. Good evening, and you're all very welcome. Our first guest tonight is Chief Co-ordinator of Carlow Women's Aid, Honoria Gilchrist. You're very welcome, Honoria.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Can you tell us about your role in Carlow Women's Aid and what interests you in getting involved with them?
Yes, I am the coordinator of Carlow Women's Aid, and this is a community-based support service which supports women and children affected by domestic violence and abuse.
And you mentioned like women and children, so what services and support is available then for them?
Yes, well, we offer a Freephone helpline, but also you can drop into our day service, and we have a wraparound support service with qualified professional staff. We've psychotherapy and counselling support. We also will, if you want to go to court, and you can go to court to seek protection under the family law, and we will help you with your statement and bring you to court and support you after that. We also have day respite, so that, you know, many women, when they make the decision to come out for help, they may be many years in an abusive relationship, and they've lack of confidence. They don't know where to go or what to do, and we just kind of slow the process down for them and invite them to just, rest and get support and seek help in their own time. There's no judgment.
Right, very good. And just from our experience of developing this show, what we discovered is there are many different types of abuse. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Yes,
I think when people hear the word domestic violence, the first image that may come up is of a young woman with injuries, facial injuries or physical injuries which are unexplained.
Sure.
However, I've been working actually in this area for over 25 years.
Right.
I worked in England for many years and in Romania. But in Ireland, domestic violence, certainly 25 years ago, was quite hidden and very much behind closed doors. And what I've noticed in the latter years is that the families are coming to our service, and we have the eldest person that's come to our service is over 80, and
Right.
that's not unusual. We've had parents come of adult children who are caught up in the whole addiction and drug addiction and criminal world, and
Right.
they are can be very violent towards their parents, looking for money, trying to extract money from their parents, and smashing up their homes. So that's another area people wouldn't think about.
Sure, yeah. And like, do you have involvement with MEND?
Yes, now again, another service that we have worked with and developed over the years is MEND, and that's Men Ending Domestic Violence. And they provide two supports. a very important service is that many men are now having the courage to report that they've been impacted and affected by violent partners. And there's a Freephone helpline and counselling and therapy specifically for men who are in that situation. And gladly, that is there is quite a take-up for that support. But the other aspect of MEND is where men work through a 6 to 9 month therapeutic programme where they attend group work and take responsibility for the impacts of their behaviour and have to take responsibility for their behaviour and their impacts of violence on their partners and their children.
Right. Very good. And like, how do you recognise then domestic abuse? Like, you know, where does it actually stem from, do you think?
Yes, sometimes it's very evident. We all know of, or many of us know if we've been next door or we've heard violent and aggressive shouting and next door, or we hear of somebody in the village, or we know of a situation. That is common. And then also, but that's the obvious form of domestic violence. We often, and we have many clients who come to us and they are still working, they're professional people, they come from professional families, and they're behind closed doors, they are suffering financial, emotional, psychological abuse, trauma, put-downs, really horrific situations. Okay. I could give an example. I know of one woman who came to me and she was a little overweight, and her partner bought her one of these bicycles, you know, these kind of you know, for exercise. Right. And she was forced to go on that bicycle non-stop a day and night while he was watching his matches and drinking beer. And if she stopped, he would just hit her, just not to mark her. But she said, who would believe me? And this woman was very broken on her self-esteem. So that would be an example of control and hidden and what might not be obvious. Yeah, God. And like, I suppose during the pandemic, I suppose nationally there was an increase, a significant increase in numbers in domestic violence. Like, have you noticed that effect in Carlow Women's Aid? Absolutely. What happened was all the domestic violence helpline calls increased significantly, and the guards were called out non-stop all over the country. And in fact, we were deemed by the government as official frontline workers. And in Carlow Women's Aid, our helpline it was so busy. Sadly and quite shockingly, we assisted over 250 individual families go to court to get protection orders against their partners. And in addition to that, there is no refuge in Carlow, but we were in the position where we had to find and open safe houses. Okay. And what advice then would you give to a woman that's in a situation like that? I would really encourage that person to just pick up the phone. It's the helpline. It's free. It's a very confidential line. We will not you know, make decisions for that woman. We will take her as she is and as she comes. Sure. She can come into our centre, drop into our centre, and also we can signpost her to many other agencies who are working alongside us and will be very supportive. Okay, great. And we can. Thanks very much, Honoria. That's all we have time for now. But best of luck with all your work that you're doing in Carlow. Thank you, Lorraine. Well, as you know, International Women's Day occurred recently, where a rally gathered outside Leinster House to listen to and voice concerns and issues that women face in Ireland and indeed the world today. Here's a glimpse at what went on.
I want to thank everyone for coming here today. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Orla O'Connor and I'm the Director of the National Women's Council, and you're so welcome to this really important rally for International Women's Day. I now want to introduce you to a really important speaker today, and that's Jason Poole. Jason is the brother of the late Jennifer Poole. He's also a secondary school teacher from Finglas, and he's speaking on behalf of men in calling out violence against women. Thank you, Jason.
We unfortunately are very much aware of the pain, hurt, grief that families go through as their loved ones are subject to abuse. Jenny was a kind, caring, hard-working woman, just like the other 243 women who should be at home today with their families who love them. Domestic violence in Ireland has become far too common. Too many women have lost their lives, 244 since 1996. Nearly 70% of the women murdered in Ireland took place in their own homes. Nearly 60% killed by a partner or ex-partner, with almost 9 in every 10 known their killer. Figures from Women's Aid in 2020 reported 1 in 4 women in Ireland have been in a relationship where abuse took place by a current or former partner. 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner. This needs to stop.
We, the women, demand our right to be seen. We demand our right to be heard. We demand our right not to be bullied ever off any public platform. We demand our right to be safe. Safe on our streets, safe in our homes. And we demand the right to refuge and protection where we are in danger, everywhere in Ireland. We demand the right to a safe and secure home for us and for our children. The right to health care when we need it and where we need it. The women of this generation, just as the last, just as the Countess did, will lead our certain march to that certain day of equality. Garamila Mahagwif Cllr.
Joining us today is former Garda Inspector Audrey Dormer and Solicitor and Wexford Cllr Cathal Byrne. Thank you both for joining us today. Audrey, let's start with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about your involvement with investigating domestic violence?
Yes, certainly, Lorraine. I was involved in my career as a guard investigating domestic violence, and then later on as an inspector prosecuting it in the district courts. The first case I was involved with has stayed with me to this day because it was just an eye-opener for me and a steep learning curve. I was going to solve all the problems of the world and got sage advice from my colleague: don't think you're going to solve in 10 minutes what takes 10 years to build.
Sure.
That stayed with me to this day. We arrested the husband. He had absolutely perpetrated horrendous violence on his wife, and he was kept in custody, and the following day I brought her to the family law courts to get a protection order. And the judge himself was horrified at the level of violence that she described. And then the following day, she withdrew her complaint. I was surprised, I was shocked, but I have to support her. I was there to investigate and not re-victimise, so it was a steep learning curve for me then. But the legislation has changed hugely over the years, of course, as well. And I think with more support for women or victims of domestic violence.
Sure, and just on that, Carl, are the lawmakers, is there any new legislation or law coming into place to combat
Yes, so
this?
the Minister for Justice recently published the new national strategy on domestic violence and gender-based violence. And I suppose one of the key aspects of that is to put the victim at the heart of everything that happens.
Sure.
And one of the best ways to do that is to support the victims of domestic violence the whole way through the system. Another aspect of that strategy is to ensure that the punishments for these crimes are sufficient. And a good example of that is the new laws that are being brought in around stalking. So right now stalking is a criminal offence in Ireland, but it's proposed at the moment and it's being voted on in the Dáil at the moment to make it a standalone offence. and to make the punishment for stalking to be more severe. And hopefully that will pass in the Dáil June or July of this year, 2022.
Okay, right. That's great. I suppose it's, you know, we have come on a long way then in involvement of that. So, just Audrey, like most women find it really difficult, to speak out and come forward. Like, what advice would you give to women in that situation, or what should they do?
I suppose the first message that has to go out is that it's not your fault.
Sure.
For them to take that first step, that's the big step. After that, the system will go on, the process will go on. There will be supports from Garda Síochána, Women's Aid, legal advice, whatever. Important for women to know that the reporting, for example, of these types of cases is prohibited. So it would have been a huge fear, I think, particularly down the country, the local papers, that this would be reported in the local papers. That can't happen now. Nothing can appear in the district or in the papers that would identify either the victim, the accused, or perhaps a dependent of the victim.
Okay.
Also, these matters are held what's called in camera. So heretofore, the district court was an open court. Everybody was there. The road traffic matters were being dealt with, alongside. Now it's closed, so that only the victim and her support person, on Garda Síochána, the defendant and his legal representation are entitled to be in the court. And that, that word needs to get out to victims that, it's a safer environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
They still have to give evidence, but it's a safer environment.
Well, that's good news for people. It's more encouraging then, probably, as you say, because smaller towns like in Wexford or that, like, it's more difficult if people have to.
I think that's a really important point. The way it is at the moment, if you are a victim of domestic violence and you decide to come forward, the case that's taken through the court system, the only people who are allowed in the court at the time when your case is being heard are the parties directly involved and their legal representatives. And while you're allowed a support there with you, it's not permitted for anyone from the press or the media to cover the case in a way that would identify any of the people. And I think that's really important that the word gets out there about that. We were talking about the changes that have come through over recent years. And on that as well, I think it's really important that people know that if you do find yourself in a situation where you are the victim of domestic violence, that housing supports are available from the local councils to assist you and house you. I have had people who have come to me in the middle of the night who have found that they just had to pack up all their belongings and their children and leave the family home because of domestic violence. And thankfully, because of changes in policies at local council level, those people are now eligible to apply for social housing, where they wouldn't have been before.
And you also then organised a vigil in Enniscorthy for women of the violence. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So given the recent tragic events that have brought this issue to the forefront of attention, and rightly so, the Enniscorthy councillors came together as a group and agreed to host a vigil in memory of all those women who have passed as a result of violence, and I see their names, many of their names here beside us. That event took place on a Saturday night. It had been organised on a Friday morning. We expected 30 or 40 people to attend, but in solidarity with those women and their families, we were joined by 600-700 people who turned out.
It was a great response, isn't it? And I think it was globally. It really did hit home with everybody. Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining us today. It was great to meet you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our team went down then to Wexford's Women's Refuge to find out more about the work that they do. So let's take a look.
The refuge is based in Wexford town. We have 4 family rooms here in the refuge. We also have an outreach service and a court accompaniment service. When we usually a woman will be after ringing in on our helpline, and if we have room available, we will tell her to come here with their children. A lot of the time women would be in a very distressed state, as you can imagine. They've been through a lot in a domestic violence situation, and they would usually arrive here with nothing, only the clothes on their back, and the same with the children. So we would have vouchers that we would have donated from the public, because they're very good here in Wexford, to be honest. We would usually find out like what the children like, what they're into, and if we haven't got, you know, stuff here for them, we'd get them and try and make it as comfortable and as home from home as we can for the children. Well, this place is really too small because in 2019 our helpline calls for the year was 700, and at the end of 2021 it was 1,980 helpline calls that we received. So there's a huge increase in calls to our helpline, and with 4 rooms, as you can imagine, we're turning people away constantly because we have no room. So hopefully our new refuge, which will hopefully be started in August, that will be a 12 independent units for women and children, so that will make a huge difference to be able to accommodate the women and children fleeing domestic violence. There wouldn't be a lot of staff either to be trying to cover. I mean, you could be on the phone, 2 staff could be on the phone, and you'd still be getting calls in, you know, so you could miss calls. It's hard, like, you know. Now we do have, as I said, the outreach service as well, so they would have their own service users to deal with as well, you know, so they would go out into the community, and if the women didn't want to come into the refuge for fear of being seen, I suppose, you know, and they would meet them in a coffee shop and have a chat or whatever, you know, and then again, if they needed to go to court, we offer the court accompaniment through the outreach service as well. We could make a safety plan with the woman if things are going wrong at home, and we'd make a safety plan with her, you know, have her keys, her passport, the children's birth certs, all that type of thing at a different location, so that, you know, if she has to leave in the middle of the night, that she has all these documents that usually social welfare and housing would be looking for, you know what I mean? So if she had to leave in the middle of the night, then she'd be able to just grab these things somewhere else, that she wouldn't have to stay at home unnecessarily, you know, longer than she should, you know, for her own safety and the safety of the children.
And we wish Lucinda and all the team the very best down in the Women's Refuge in Wexford, and the fantastic work they are doing down there. Now, generally when we think of domestic abuse, the physical side of things come to the fore. But as we touched on earlier in the programme, the emotional and psychological abuse can be just as scarring. Joining me now is one such survivor, Stacie Atre. Stacie, you're very welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us more about your experience with domestic abuse?
Yes, I had known about domestic violence statistically before I had ever experienced it personally.
Okay.
So back in the US, I was in charge of a women's group that focused on the education and empowerment of women in their career and in their personal lives. And so I knew all the statistics, things like every day 137 women are murdered by a member of their own family, and that's a global statistic. Or, you know, that 40% of domestic abuse cases go unreported.
Right, okay.
And so for me, I experienced psychological abuse, and a lot of times you would feel like, well, she knew all the statistics and maybe she should have known this or that, but really it was something that I experienced over 100 small interactions with my partner. And you know, we were together for a number of years and our families knew each other. And so I just never really expected it to happen. And like I said, it wasn't one visible incident like physical violence.
Okay.
Psychological abuse happens over hundreds of small interactions that you have every day.
All right, yeah. So, and can you tell us a moment like when you realised that you were in that abusive relationship and, you know, what happened?
Yeah, so one of the scarier moments was when we were having an intense fight, and there was yelling, and he started to get physically abusive around me. So there was a basket beside me, and he started kicking it, and he was yelling in my face, and then he started punching the wall beside me, and I was really, really scared, and I just thought, you know, am I going to be the next thing that he punches? And no one should ever have to feel scared in your own home.
Absolutely, no. And like, I suppose, was there a time then that you realised like you needed to get out of that relationship, that it just wasn't healthy for you?
Yeah, there were lots of instances where I wanted to leave, but after so many years, you know, and trying to talk to my family about it, and you have people that believe you and people that don't believe you, and I just knew myself, and I knew that I was becoming physically ill from the stress that I was under. So because I was constantly in a state of fight or flight, in a fear mode in my own home, I started having stomach issues, skin issues, and I just was so unhappy. And I feel that every person deserves to live a happy and healthy life. And so I knew I had to leave.
And what did you do? Like, did you go to a friend or did you seek help? Or?
I did. Thankfully, I was financially independent. I had my own money, but unfortunately, a lot of women in these situations don't have access to their own money and resources. But I did have help from friends and family, and I was able to leave when I wanted to, and you know, with minimal impact to my day-to-day life. And for some, that's not a reality, and there should be more resources for women in those cases.
Absolutely, yeah. So what advice would you give to a woman out there, you know, that's tuning in to this program, you know, if they were in a similar situation to yourself?
I would just tell them that they deserve to be happy, that every person deserves to feel safe in their own home, and that you know yourself. Like, you trust that you know what is right and what is not right, and the world tries to tell women that we're, you know, sometimes too emotional or dramatic about things. That's not the case. With psychological abuse, it happens over 100 little interactions. So sometimes you can feel like, am I making it up? But you're not. You know what's right and wrong. And I just encourage them to get the help that they need and keep talking to people until you find the people that are going to help you and that are going to believe you, because they are out there.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Stacie. That's all we have time for at the moment, but thank you for joining us and telling us your story. You're very brave. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it for tonight. If you or someone you know has experienced any of what has been discussed on tonight's show, you can find helpful information through our website, or indeed Freephone Women's Aid Helpline. That's it for episode 1. Join us again next week, where in episode 2 we will be looking at the question of consent and where the lines are drawn. Join us then. Bye for now.